Welcome to part 4 of the Flipped Classroom and Project-Based Learning Theory and Practice workshop. Again, this is Katie. Make sure to hit me up on Twitter if you, while you're listening to this, or if you want to connect in any way, shape, or form. And don't forget about the back channel. We're going to now kind of change modes to project-based learning. So, this is going to be your introduction to PBL. A lot of you have probably heard this term before, and it can be used for problem or project-based learning. So first we're going to differentiate between the two. So the difference between project-based learning and problem-based learning. Well, project-based learning is going to be following more in the maker movement. So this is going to be creating and innovating. Okay, so this is we're going to create something new or different based on maybe something you're learning in class or a problem that you see. Then problem-based learning is going to be use of case studies. We're going to solve problems. So we're going to look at, for instance, water pollution, something I do a lot in my environmental science class. So we may look at the problem of the Ganges River in India, and students will come up with problems or solutions and those kind of things, but we're not actually going to make anything. If it's project-based, then maybe we'll create something to take care of water pollution. Okay, so those are the difference. Using PBL, we can use those really important application, evaluation, and synthesis pieces of Bloom's taxonomy. Students are going to have more voice and choice. Those are my favorite 2 words in my classroom, voice and choice. We're going to allow students to set goals, break down big projects, and this really does encourage interdisciplinary studies. But most importantly, we're going to use creativity, okay? And really, I've never seen this said any more perfectly. Creativity is intelligence having fun. So we're going to take these concepts that we're going to call intelligence, and we're going to have fun with them, and we're going to create, and we're going to make things. So, in my classroom, my PBL classroom, you see a lot of students working together. So we have this group of 3 boys, we have these guys all working together, they're using a lot of technology. These guys were writing a script, so they're writing, they're collaborating, okay, and they're creating. So this was an advertisement for a Golgi apparatus bar and grill. Golgi apparatus in your cells, they deliver and create proteins and lipids. And so they created this little Golgi apparatus bar and grill. That's kind of what you're taking in when you eat meat and those kind of things. So it was a really cool, creative idea. These guys were drawing a little cartoon, and this was all based on showcasing the organelles in a cell and showing if they were humans, what kind of jobs would they have. And so this is just a little project, and then they presented. So we're learning lots of different of things. It's all in class. So my project-based classroom is all in class. Okay, therefore I can be the expert in the room and really guide them into how to do these things correctly. So there are 2 different ways to really use PBL. There's short-term, which are in-class projects. Mine usually last between 2 and 4 days. They're very teacher-driven, so I'll give all the directions, I'll set the rubric, those kind of things. They use a lot of problem solving and critical thinking. So if you were a Golgi apparatus, what would be your job? If cells needed to create homeostasis, what can you, or needed to maintain homeostasis, what could you create to make sure, to measure that, okay? They provide a lot of collaboration and teamwork. So students will often work together, and they come to you for guidance. So you are the expert in these short-term projects. We're going to research, write, create, design, not necessarily all of those in every single project. So we may pick a couple that to use. So the long-term projects are usually going to be semester or year long. Depends on what kind of class you're teaching. So if it's a semester-long class, you can only have a semester-long project. But if you have a year-long class, there is a potential of having a year-long project. And in my environment, we have rolling admissions, so semester-long projects really work better. They're a lot more student-driven. So this is your voice and choice. Okay, students get to decide what they want to do. It's still involving problem solving and critical thinking, but you're also giving them choices rather to collaborate or work individually. Because these projects are so long, if a student does not want to work with anyone else, I give them that right. Okay. Because it's just such a long project. And you will find too that sometimes students don't realize they didn't want to work with other people, and then they have to learn how to deal with their decisions. So the experts are also going to be different. Whereas in short term, you are the expert. In the long term projects, which I call my 20% projects, okay, the expert could be you, or it might not be you. So for example, some of my students a few years ago were doing a project on the difference between left brain and right brain. They were investigating what's the difference, who's more likely to be which one, da da da. And my father is an expert in that scenario, and so they Skyped, and they asked them a lot of questions, and they emailed back and forth, and it was really cool. They got to really talk to an expert in that field, and I wasn't offended that it wasn't me. I don't know that much about that stuff. And here we're going to have a lot more steps, and these steps have to be followed. So first you're going to research, then your students have to plan. My students have to write out a proposal, and then they design whatever their project is, they create, they innovate, and then maybe they go back and they research and they plan and they do it all over again. So you're going to redesign, recreate, those kind of things. I use both in my classroom. My 20% projects I modeled after Google, so they're passion projects, but short-term projects are going to cover a specific topic or concept. So here's some examples from mine. In my short-term projects, we're going to get things like movies, posters, songs, games, advertisements, those kind of things, poems, presentations, short stories. But in the long term, I've gotten dioramas. This is the evolution of a whale. Okay, so it started on land and goes to the sea, etc. A couple of students created some 3D printed some brains. So we have two different ones. I got a creation of a robot hand. One of my female students saw a need for better prosthetics and ones that were actually mobile. And so she learned how to program, and she learned about circuits, and she learned all of these kind of things, all while doing some biomedical engineering kind of stuff. So just like in the flipped classroom workshop, I want you to pause the video and write down what are some of the benefits of integrating project-based learning into your classroom, and what are some of the challenges. If you're working with someone else and you guys are doing this together, share with each other. If you're not working with anyone, let's share through the back channel, which is at the very beginning. If you need a refresher of the website, it's at the very beginning of this presentation. All right, so when I'm doing this, here are some of what I find are benefits and challenges. My number one benefit for my classroom is voice and choice. I also get to apply and evaluate. So I'm using those top tier things on Bloom's taxonomy. We've all learned about this stuff, but it's really hard to integrate sometimes. My students get to have fun. So that's really, really interesting. And we get to collaborate with other classes. So not just collaborating with other people. They're not just collaborating student to student, but we get to collaborate with other classes. My environmental science class this year collaborated with the modern history class to look at populations. So we looked at population decline and increase in different countries and continents, and then the modern history students acted as our historians. So they did research and really provided insight into what was happening in the world at those times. Really, really fun and interesting. Challenges, my biggest challenge has been time. Okay. My other, really setting aside and figuring out how to make time to do this stuff. My other biggest challenge is figuring out what to do. I don't feel as though I'm that creative of a person, so how am I going to come up with all these projects and neat things to do? And then worrying about content. Okay, so if you're worried about, well, I've got to cover all this content, I don't have time to do project-based learning. This is where flipped learning can really come in, because they can get the content at home and then you can do the application and the projects in class. So how do you do it? You got to make time. You've got to create time, not only for yourself, but for your students. You got to flip your content. If you have to lecture in class, you are not going to have enough time to do projects. You're just going to run out of time. You also need to start at the end. So start with your rubrics and give in detailed instructions based on what you want at the end, and then work your way back. How are you going to assess students? What are you looking for at the end? And then what information can you provide to them to get them going? Ask your students. Ask your students what they want. Give them a voice. Do you want to make a movie? Do you want to draw something? Do you want to write a poem? What do you want to do? What is something you're passionate about that doesn't necessarily have to directly do with the content you're teaching? And then lastly, use the internet. Okay, this is a real Google search. I really did put into Google project-based learning activities and a million hits. Okay, so be specific. Project-based learning activities to learn about Macbeth. Project-based learning activities to learn about the cell cycle. Whatever you're interested in, use the internet. And then modify it for your own content. Okay, so hopefully this gave you a good introduction to project-based learning. Again, hit me up on Twitter if you need anything, okay? And then don't forget about that back channel. Talk to your colleagues, talk to Bill and I, and we're here to help.